This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Otelli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. French President Emmanuel Macron urges his Chinese counterpart to help end the war in Ukraine and narrow trade gaps, while pitching closer rules-based cooperation on his three-day state visit. Hong Kong, meantime, races to strip scaffolding mesh from all building sites under renovation after substandard netting was blamed for the rapid spread of the deadly Wongfu complex fire. And South Korea says it will push to free 6 nationals held for years in North Korea by restarting long-stalled talks with Pyongyang. And the U.S. holding back on plans to sanction a Chinese spy agency over its alleged role in a cyber-espionage campaign, Salt Typhoon. Also in the bulletin, motivating factors prompting the rise of Japan's far right. We uncover signs of the movement gaining traction. French President Emmanuel Macron has urged his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping to help end the war in Ukraine and to tackle trade deficits, as the two leaders met today at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. Well, Mr. Xi held a welcome ceremony for Mr. Macron as the French leader is in China for a 3-day state visit. His trip comes as the European Union seeks China's help to end the war in Ukraine, while Beijing looks for diplomatic wins amid U.S. tariffs. The French leader called for fairer trade ties, saying that the two nations must rise above their differences for the greater good, while urging China to work with the G7 countries towards rules-based economic governance.
L'Europe et la Chine ont un rôle à jouer pour poser, avec d'autres partenaires, les fondations d'une gouvernance économique mondiale équitable, solide, fondée sur des règles et non sur la loi du plus fort.
The Chinese leader Xi Jinping echoing that sentiment, calling for more stable ties, where both sides consistently demonstrate, quote, the independence and strategic vision of a great power.
双方同意推动双边经贸关系 平衡发展，扩大双向投资，为两国企业提供公平、透明、非歧视、可预期的营商环境。
And for more, we are joined now by our correspondents in Beijing. We have CNA's Tan Sihui, as well as Ross Cullen covering the story for CNA in Paris. Well, first to you, Sihui. I mean, quite a lot was talked about, but walk us through some of the highlights of Macron's meeting with the Chinese leaders.
Well, main highlight is definitely his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, Mr. Xi calling on France to stand on the right side of history. This is similar rhetoric to what was being said during the September military parade hosted by China, commemorating the victory against Japanese aggression during World War II. And this comes amid a brawl between China and Japan. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi saying that the country, meaning Japan's stance, has not changed about the Taiwan issue. Chinese Foreign Affairs Ministry saying that this comment made by the Prime Minister is unacceptable. And so analysts are saying that Mr. Xi's language used today seeks to suggest that Japan is out of sync with history, and there seems to be some intention to split the U.S. systems of alliances and also to isolate Japan. Let's take a listen to Mr. Xi's remarks.
当前，世界百年变局加速演进。 人类又一次站在何去何从的十字路口，中法两国应当展现责任担当，高举多边主义旗帜，穿透阴霾迷雾，坚定站在历史正确一边。中方应同法方一道，始终从两国人民根本利益和国际社会长远利益出发，排除各种干扰，坚持平等对话。 开放合作，让中法全面战略伙伴关系在新甲子走得更稳更好。
Now, both leaders also signed 12 cooperation agreements ranging from areas such as nuclear energy, population aging, as well as bilateral investment. Now, Mr. Xi also touched on China-Europe relations, and he hopes to see a brighter 50 years of bilateral and China-Europe relationship. Also saying that relations have mutual benefits and win-win cooperation. And this comes amid trade tensions with the EU facing a trade deficit of around $357 billion. Now, Mr. Macron is expected to also meet Chinese Premier Li Qiang before he makes his way to Chengdu City in Sichuan province.
So, as you've mentioned, President Xi will be accompanying President Macron on his visit to Sichuan. How significant is that?
Well, it's very significant as Mr. Xi rarely accompanies world leaders outside of Beijing. And so he going to Chengdu City with Mr. Macron, and this being the third time with Mr. Macron, is very significant. And it's also very curious for me to see Mr. Xi being beside Mr. Macron as they both were meeting the press today and they had delivered remarks. This really projects that the relationship is at a high-level strategic stage, is really reserved for visits where China is comfortable with or wants to highlight in terms of to the domestic and international audiences. So showing presence in Chengdu City, just like what my colleague did within a story calling Chengdu City the most one of the happiest cities in China, is really a symbolic gesture. And the fact that there is a panda conservation facility with speculation that there could be 2 new pandas going to be loaned to France, it is a symbolic gesture. And the fact that both sides also signed a new deal on panda protection really makes it a very concrete strategic level relationship.
Well, I want to bring you in to the conversation now. Ross, from Europe's point of view, how has President Macron pushed the EU's economic and geopolitical goals during talks with China?
Well, certainly in terms of the geopolitical goals, more attempts to try to encourage Xi Jinping to apply pressure on his ally Vladimir Putin to bring the war to an end. We know that there were French diplomatic officials speaking to French media saying that the president will attempt to convince and influence Russia since the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and since the start of the full-scale invasion in 2022. There's been no official condemnation by Beijing of Moscow's actions. Certainly, Emmanuel Macron wants China to step up its outreach on that issue. In terms of the economic side, the EU and France see China as a partner, a competitor and a rival, all at the same time in different spheres and different sectors. Emmanuel Macron warning of a disintegration to the world order, saying by admission that there are differences between Paris and Beijing, but, quote, our capacity to work together is decisive.
But Ross, overnight the EU did unlock 3 billion euros to curb reliance on China's rare earth. And how has this basically, weighed on Macron's talks with Mr. Xi?
Yeah, just looking at that statement from the European Union saying that they want to bring in, quote, concrete tools to protect the industry from geopolitical and price shocks, promote rare earth projects and partner with like-minded countries. So perhaps at the moment they're not seeing China as a like-minded country in terms of its the over-reliance by the bloc on China's rare earth minerals and critical minerals. The European Union wants to depend on Europe when it comes to things that Europe needs. It really wants to cut its over-reliance on China in many different areas. There's a warning that the European Commission could potentially force industries to reduce their purchases from China to try to look for other streams of investment when it comes to the rare earths that European companies need.
Good talking to you both. Ross Cullen covering the story for CNA in Paris and CNA's Tan Sihui in Beijing. Thanks for that. Hong Kong authorities have begun to take down mesh netting on buildings under renovation across the city. Now, the mesh netting has come up as one of the sources for the quick spread of the fire that gutted 7 of 8 buildings of the Wang Fuk complex last week. 159 people died.
Because of the incident, there should be possibility to get fire. So if you take it down, there's less chance to get same kind of accident. So the resident will feel better if they agree to take it down. So they agree to take it down within this week.
According to the last week of the very terrible accident in Typhoon, so at this moment, the government, they request to remove all the green net. I think it's more, at this moment, can comfort the residents' psychology issues, at least.
The government gave the order for the immediate removal of scaffolding nets on all public and private residential buildings yesterday, with a Saturday deadline to do so. It said the move is for public safety and to help ease fears of residents and businesses. Inspectors have also started checking that nettings being used across the city are up to standard. Investigations into the Typhoon inferno has blamed substandard material for the 40-hour blaze. But some are pushing back against blaming the bamboo scaffolding for the flames. At least 2 experts say bamboo does not easily ignite. They warn against unduly blaming the natural material at the expense of looking into other systemic safety issues. Investigations also showed that none of the fire alarms at the residential complex were working as they should. The Hong Kong Typhoon Football Club has stepped onto the field for their first domestic game since the fire. The entire stadium stood for a minute's silence ahead of the kickoff. Typhoon Football Club and rival team Golik North District wore black armbands as they remember the victims of the fire that has devastated the community. Well, fans of the Typhoon team also came out in force, carrying banners and wearing the team colour green. Born and raised in Typhoon, Roy has been supporting the local Typhoon team for more than a decade.
I decided to apply for holiday, for annual leave, and to come here during the afternoon. But originally, this match should kick off last Sunday. I remember last Sunday, but due to this accident, the Hong Kong FA decided to delay this match and will kick off this afternoon at 3 p.m. So I don't have other choice, and I decided to come, and because I think it's too important for our fan group and also for our friends. All friends, fans, and also the residents from this district, from Typhoon, to come and also show respect and at least do something for this accident.
South Korea has vowed to work on securing the release of half a dozen of its nationals who remain detained in North Korea. They were arrested between 2013 and 2016 on charges including espionage. They include 3 missionaries as well as 3 unnamed defectors with identities masked by Seoul to protect the safety of their families in the north. Seoul said in a statement that the issue needs to be urgently addressed through the resumption of talks with Pyongyang. The confirmation followed a question directed at President Xi Jinping yesterday on whether efforts are made to bring back those detainees. North Korea, which remains technically at war with the South, has consistently rebuffed conciliatory gestures from President Xi Jinping since he took office in June. Well, this issue of the detainees, according to Seoul's unification ministry, was last raised with Pyongyang back in 2018. The South Korean leader says he is hopeful that U.S. leader Donald Trump can bring North Korea's Kim Jong-un back to the table for dialogue. China is reportedly deploying a large number of naval and coast guard vessels across East Asian waters in its largest maritime show of force to date. Reuters news agency, citing 4 sources and intelligence reports, found Chinese ships massing in waters stretching from the southern part of the Yellow Sea through the East China Sea and down into the contested South China Sea, as well as into the Pacific. More than 90 vessels are said to be in the region as of this morning. Reports say the operation is exceeding the deployment China sent out last December that prompted Taiwan to raise its alert level. Reuters says it was allowed to review intelligence reports from a country in the region under the condition it did not name the nation due to the sensitivity of the situation. The other 4 security sources cited all spoke on condition of anonymity for the same reason. The Taiwan Security Bureau said yesterday that this is generally considered the Chinese military's most active season for drills. The island is also keeping tabs on 4 Chinese naval formations in the Western Pacific. Japan's self-defense forces declined to comment specifically about Chinese military movements, but said it did not find any sharp increase in activities recently. Reuters says China's defense and foreign ministries, as well as its Taiwan Affairs Office, did not respond to requests for comment. Time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, time is running out for the world's largest commercial drone maker as it risks being locked out of the US market. And a sushi showdown in Thailand as local and Japanese chains vie for local appetites.
In 1949, Chiang Kai-shek fled to Taiwan. Today, his memory divides the territory.
蒋公就有权利可以决定这个岛的命运。
他证明了自己不是台湾人，他也没有办法留给台湾人任何的遗产。
How does his legacy shape how Taiwan views its future with China? Chiang Kai-shek, Shadow Across the Strait. Monday on CNA.
This is for those who move, those who don't wait for things to happen. They make them happen. They don't follow maps. They draw them and build what isn't there. They don't call it instinct. They call it Tuesday.
At Standard Chartered, we're here for those who never stand still, who want trusted expertise in the world's most dynamic markets.
Now is your time.
South Korea's dark history of repression, nearly revived by a martial law bid.
그 순간 유리창이 깨지고 막 들어오고 있고 아주 긴박한 상황이다.
Sparking defiance and the defense of democracy.
몸빵이라도 하고 소리라도 질러 보려고.
How the martial law crisis changed the nation. Wednesday on CNA.
CNA Summit, coming soon in February 2026. When nations collide and technology disrupts, the world stands at a turning point. This December, China's restrictions on rare earth exports have shaken the world as the US looks for alternatives.
Securing supplies is only a first step.
Could the Asia-Pacific hold the key to solving the rare earth problem? In the new season of When Titans Clash, the race for rare earths. When ATMs across Taiwan were hacked and began spitting up millions in cash.
有2名外国男子全副武装遮掩，在领款的过程中，后面的民众认为他可能是车手，就准备要报警。
Watch how Taiwanese police cracked the code and took down an international cybercrime syndicate inside the great ATM heist. Across parts of Asia, the digital native generation is challenging power.
They want a society that is fair.
Are governments ready for the Gen Z rebels demanding change? This December on CNA.
Hello there, good to have your company on East Asia Tonight. It is now time for business news with Roland Lim. And Roland, what is it we're hearing about President Trump shelving this major sanction against China's spy agency just to keep his new trade truce alive?
Yes, the White House is easing off Beijing even as a massive telecoms hack continues. Security hawks in the USA, it's a risky bargain. The U.S. government is pausing plans to sanction China's Ministry of State Security over Salt Typhoon, according to the Financial Times. Now, Salt Typhoon is a sweeping cyber-espionage operation which breached unencrypted communications across major U.S. telecom networks, even those of senior U.S. officials. China, for its part, denies any involvement in the telecom hacks. Officials say the goal is to preserve the fragile truce struck between Presidents Trump and Xi last October ahead of Trump's planned visit in April to Beijing. But despite the severity of the breach, the White House has held back on sanctions and new export controls. Coordination on China policy has tightened in recent weeks, with Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller now charged with ensuring no agency actions disrupt the diplomatic thaw. Now, that shift follows internal friction over a memo raising concerns about Chinese tech giant Alibaba, allegations that the company strongly denies. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is also weighing whether to grant licenses allowing NVIDIA to sell its H200 advanced chip to China. U.S. President Trump has held talks with NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang on chip export restrictions amid renewed pressure in Congress for tighter controls. Now, Jensen Huang downplayed the risk of chips being smuggled out at an event hosted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
Well, a GPU for AI centers, AI data centers, that GPU weighs 2 tons. It has 1.5 million parts. It consumes 200,000 watts. It costs $3 million. Every so often somebody says, these GPUs are being smuggled. I really would love to see it. Not to mention, you have to smuggle enough of them to fill a football field full of these things so that you could run it as an AI data center.
The CEO of the world's top chipmaker also met with key lawmakers as the Trump administration weighs if NVIDIA's advanced AI chips should be cleared for export to China. Mr. Huang said that he warned lawmakers about the risks of AI being governed by differing state laws. NVIDIA may have also scored a major lobbying win when he was in Washington, D.C. Lawmakers reportedly dropped a proposal to limit sales of advanced AI chips to China from a must-pass defense bill. A showdown brewing over the future of drones in the U.S. and the world's biggest drone maker is running out of time. China's DJI has appealed to 5 U.S. national security agencies, urging them to conduct a government-mandated security review before a looming deadline. Under recent national defense legislation, DJI must be audited by the 23rd of December, or they will be added to the Federal Communications Commission's covered list. Now, that designation would effectively block new DJI products from entering the U.S. market. DJI currently dominates the global civilian drone market with about 70% share and more than half of U.S. commercial drones as well. Research shows 9 out of 10 drones used by American public safety agencies are made by DJI. The looming ban would halt new models from receiving FCC approval. Existing drones already in the country would not be affected. Meanwhile, DJI remains locked in a legal battle with the Pentagon over allegations that its products could support the Chinese military, claims that DJI denies. A Chinese tech giant Hikvision pushing back against tighter U.S. restrictions. The manufacturer's American arm filed a legal challenge to a new rule by the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC voted unanimously in October to block new approvals for devices with parts from companies from its so-called covered list. Firms like Hikvision, Huawei, ZTE, China Mobile, and China Telecom. The agency also gained the ability to bar previously approved equipment, a move Hikvision says goes too far. Now, Hikvision has already faced setbacks earlier this year. A U.S. appeals court upheld a 2022 FCC ban on new approvals of its equipment. The crackdown has been intensifying, with major U.S. retailers recently removing millions of prohibited Chinese electronics, including home security cameras and smartwatches. U.S. President Trump eyeing potential production of the Japanese pint-sized kei cars. Although highly popular in Asia, the ultra-compact cars do not meet federal standards for new vehicles in the U.S. Mr. Trump pressed ahead with plans despite concerns that the K cars would be too small and too slow to be driven safely on American roads. His decision comes as part of efforts to relax stringent fuel efficient standards of the previous Biden administration. Mr. Trump's seemingly embrace of the K cars is latest stance on passenger vehicles being used as a geopolitical bargaining chip between Washington and Tokyo. The Trump administration lowered tariffs on Japanese auto imports to 15% from 27.5% previously. Passenger cars have been a core issue in trade negotiations earlier this year. Over in Thailand, battlegrounds opening up for the hearts and stomachs of the country's sushi lovers. Japanese sushi chains are drawn to the country as what one operator calls, quote, the most lucrative market in the world. Analysts say competition is expected to intensify as local companies are upping the ante on investing in cold chain logistics, which improves the quality of seafood. Sushi has been gaining popularity among Thais who developed a taste for it during their trips to Japan. Now that's despite a typical plate of sushi costing more in Thailand than in Japan. Last year, Thais were the 6th biggest group of visitors, accounting for more than 3% of arrivals. You like sushi, don't you, Otelli? But I don't think you'd be traveling all the way to Thailand for sushi because, you know, we're spoiled here in Singapore.
I know. We do have a lot of options in Singapore. But, you know, I'm really heartened by the fact that, you know, in Bangkok, they're actually investing in this cold chain logistics, right? Because, I mean, considering it's raw food, I mean, you could get terribly sick if the climate is you know, humid, like in Thailand. I mean, you could get quite sick from it. So who knows? The next time I'm in Bangkok, I might try some.
Okay, yeah, I call me a food snob. But if I was to eat sushi, I'd go to Japan or I'd go to a reputable restaurant because I want to see that sushi chef, presumably trained in Japan, making it for me there and then.
Yeah, I know. That's one key question I always ask now. I mean, is the chef Japanese? So, all right. On that note, thank you so very much for that report, Roland. We are going to go for another break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, a discussion on what's on China's mind as its ally Russia meets its complex neighbor India. Plus, Singapore and Malaysia announced a slew of agreements, including new consulates and cross-border transport links.
Right-wing populism is on the rise in Japan.
We say Japanese first.
What's driving it?
There's been a surge of nationalistic sentiment, vilifying other countries as preying on Japan's success.
外国人の問題がソーシャルメディアで非常に大きな問題、話題を集めているところがあって、
どっか行くときにやっぱどうしてもその目線が気になっちゃって。
Insight tonight on CNA.
Biodiversity is booming, which is inviting for some local foragers and farmers who embrace edible wildlife.
We're the largest organic banana grower in Singapore.
This is jam.
Amazing. So the mulberries are from the garden.
No, that's delicious.
Singapore is ramping up conservation efforts locally and across the region.
I really do love reptiles and finding out about them, so I really love my job.
Building must relate to the lives of the people.
目前还是一直要创新一些新的东西，我也不希望是人家把我看作是80岁的人。
There are those who dare to be different, who have made their mark in Singapore and beyond.
You have such big dreams, you want to change the world with your art.
Obviously, every fighter wants to win, so all you can do is to prepare yourself to win.
Hello again, you're watching East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. French President Emmanuel Macron urges his Chinese counterpart to help end the war in Ukraine and narrow trade gaps, while pitching closer rules-based cooperation on his three-day state visit. Hong Kong, meantime, races to strip scaffolding mesh from all building sites under renovation after substandard netting was blamed for the rapid spread of the deadly Wong Fu complex fire. And South Korea says it will push to free 6 nationals held for years in North Korea by restarting long-stalled talks with Pyongyang. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to arrive in New Delhi today to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi in a visit widely seen as a test of India's balancing act between global powers. Well, observers are saying that India could use the opportunity to fine-tune its ties with Russia amid concerns over the so-called no-limits partnership between Moscow and Beijing. Now, what's expected to top the agenda between the leaders? Defense, with reports of a fighter jet and air defense system deal in the works. Energy as well. Moscow will be hoping to keep its discounted oil supplies flowing, a move that has strained New Delhi's ties with Washington. Now, Mr. Modi has repeatedly resisted U.S. calls to distance itself from Russia. And in what appears to be a show of solidarity, the Indian leader met with Mr. Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping in September, sending a signal that attempts to isolate these 3 nations have not only fallen short, but united them. So let's find out more from Manoj Kawaramani, Chairperson, Indo-Pacific Studies Program and a China Studies Fellow at Takshashila Institution. Well, thanks very much for joining us this evening. Well, first up, I thought we'll just start with how this looks from Beijing, because from China's point of view, because Beijing will surely be watching this very closely with this Modi and Putin huddle. How do you think China is basically reading this visit, and what are they going to be looking out for in terms of the outcome?
Thank you so much for having me. Look, from Beijing's perspective, this visit is not necessarily a bad deal if it particularly creates further friction between India and the United States. Beijing will look at it from a sort of, that's the asset sort of ledger side of the ledger for Beijing. On the liability side of the ledger is the fact that it understands that both India and China have a historic relationship, and India and Russia have a historic relationship, and the fact that India and Russia work with each other to counterbalance China to some degree and to hedge against China's influence. That said, I think China's relationship with Russia today is qualitatively far deeper than India's relationship with Russia. And I think Beijing understands that. The fact that Chinese leaders, Chinese foreign minister was just in Moscow recently, having a wide-ranging strategic stability conversation with Russia, tells you that that relationship is qualitatively far deeper. So I don't think Beijing is terribly going to be anxious about what's happening in Delhi, but it will be keeping a keen eye in terms of the proximity and the kind of balancing signs that may come out of these meetings.
So this three-way dynamic, right, among India, Russia and China, because Russia is now India's biggest crude supplier and also a dominant defense partner, but it's also increasingly dependent on China. So in this triangle, is it obvious to you who has the most leverage?
I think Beijing has the most leverage in the triangle. I think China has an extremely strong relationship with Russia. Russia is significantly dependent on China, not just from an energy perspective as a market, but also as a supplier of industrial products. This visit currently that we're seeing in Delhi, Russia's crude trade with India has grown over the last few years because of the nature of discounts that have been available owing to the war in Ukraine and the sanctions. That's not necessarily an organic trade. I'm not necessarily certain that it will sustain over a long period of time. Already what we're seeing is that sanctions on particular Russian companies, energy companies, have resulted in indications that India's imports of crude from Russia will dip substantially from about 1.6 million barrels a day to less than about 600,000 barrels a day. So I don't think that's an organic trade. On the contrary, Russia and China today have a far deeper relationship, much more deeply engaged from a strategic point of view, from a military point of view, and from an economic point of view. So my sense is Beijing has far greater leverage in this relationship.
So I just want to widen the lens now to India's other partners in East Asia, Japan and South Korea, right? I mean, they're firmly with the US on Ukraine, that's one. But when they see India deepening ties, deepening energy and defense ties with Russia, what kind of questions do you think they are asking about India's reliability as a security partner in the Indo-Pacific?
Look, I think questions about reliability, to me, are misplaced. The issue is that, and I think everybody understands it, we are in a different world order. We are drifting towards greater multipolarity, and we're looking at every country essentially trying to pursue its pragmatic interests. India's pragmatic interests are in the Indo-Pacific remaining stable, remaining free from coercion, and remaining open economically, and remaining secure for all the countries in the region. So in that sense, the Indian position in the Indo-Pacific is quite clear. When it comes to the Indian position on the war in Ukraine, it is quite distinct from China. India has not supported the Russian military-industrial complex. India has essentially traded with Russia because it is an energy insecure nation, and it's been getting cheap discounts, particularly after the economy was deeply hit by the pandemic. So I think countries in the region understand that pragmatism and self-interest is primarily what's driving some of these actions. That does not necessarily mean that it's going to impede the broader security dynamic in the Indo-Pacific. India's broader vision for the Indo-Pacific, I think, is fairly well communicated. And I think the US also understands that. What's happening currently is a product of several other factors within American domestic politics, rather than necessarily concerns about India's reliability. Just to put a pin on that point, if you look at the broader India-US relationship, yes, economic ties are strained. Yes, people-to-people ties have been a little bit strained, but the defense relationship continues to remain robust.
So if we put all of this together, I mean, the question is what sort of world order India is really betting on. So I'm saying, beyond the photo ops and the hugs that we see, what should we be looking out for? The kind of signals, whether it's on energy, defense, diplomacy during this visit, whether is India actually trying to bet on a different world order, or is it the one that Washington envisions it to be?
I'm not sure what Washington's vision of the world order is today, but my sense is what India thinks of the world today is a world where power balances are much more fragmented, where the division of power is much more fragmented, and you have to try and have multiple diversified partnerships which are issue-based, where you pursue your interests. You no longer a camp sort of world is not possible, neither is the sort of unipolar neoliberal world order possible. So what you're looking at is far more pragmatic issue-based coalitions, and in that you work with a diversified set of partners. With Russia, India's relationship is based on specific interests and a shared history of, sort of partnership. But I think that relationship is also reduced in significance if you go back, say, 50 years ago to today, and that's likely to remain the trend. So to my mind, India's vision of the world is one where you deal with countries based on your interest and based on shared interests and build partnerships on issues that you can work together on.
Right, many thanks. Thanks for helping us understand what's at stake here. Manoj Kawaramani, Chairperson, Indo-Pacific Studies Program at Takshashila Institution. Thank you. And of course, we'll have more coverage on Putin's visit to India on Asia tonight, taking place in about an hour's time from 8 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time on CNA. Now, Singapore will open consulates in the Malaysian states of Sabah and Sarawak, deepening ties between the two neighbouring countries. And that's among a raft of announcements made at the Singapore-Malaysia Leaders' Retreat, as both sides mark 60 years of diplomatic ties. Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong and his Malaysian counterpart Anwar Ibrahim also firmed up cooperation on energy, education and the fight against drugs.
We've continued to strengthen our people-to-people and cultural ties We've just exchanged MOUs on health cooperation and the fight against drugs, which will enable us to learn from one another in these areas of interest and strengthen the resilience of our societies. We have stepped up exchanges between our officials, including education and cultural exchanges.
Both leaders noted the good progress made on the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone, especially with improved transport connectivity with the upcoming rapid transit system. Well, they signed a supplementary deal to the RTS-Link bilateral agreement, which will facilitate preparations for co-located custom facilities and the eventual operational use of the RTS-Link. Reciprocal improvements to the cross-border taxi scheme are also on the agenda.
We are open to encourage more investments from Singapore, and Malaysia is a trading nation, as you know. And with all these uncertainties, it is critical that we enhance this sort of trade between countries and within ASEAN. And that is why this showcase of this economic zone can be a good example how countries can work together for the benefit of both the economies and the people.
Well, the bilateral issues were also tabled for discussions, including airspace, water and maritime delimitation. Though the leaders recognize that these are complex issues that are not easy to resolve, but both sides say they will continue engaging in good faith. Well, time now for another break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, an increasing number of Japanese are seen turning to far-right ideology. Details next. Plus, Japan's dish of the year goes to a grain that's central to Japanese culture.
New on Singapore Hour. Forget bedtime. Uncover the magic that comes alive after dark.
The light comes on, the music kicks in, the atmosphere turns electric.
And meet the unstoppable pair turning yesterday's fashion into tomorrow's must-haves.
We've upcycled over 60 tons of textile waste. That is over 150,000 items rehomed.
Don't miss Singapore Hour, Friday on CNA.
Saturday on Japan Hour, the first of the Cycle Around Japan series takes you to Akita.
Oh, beautiful.
For a 3-day exploration of its mountains.
Great view.
Rivers, lakes and onsens.
Okay, this is definitely a first.
And inhabitants.
Oh, good boy.
Japan Hour, Saturday on CNA.
Japan Hour is brought to you by Sumitomo Corporation. MUFG, committed to empowering a brighter future. Zip Air, winter's double daily flights for sale. And IHI.
Fundamentals or FOMO? What's behind the rush for gold? Year-end moves to slash your 2026 travel bills.
If you don't start preparing early, you pay more and you get less.
Plus, the weight loss business plan that led to wealth gain with a crispy twist. Money Mind, Saturday on CNA.
Diversity and inclusivity is what makes our hawker cuisine so vibrant, and that's what makes us so Singaporean.
Outrage in New York over allegations that a young Chinese boy was separated from his father at an immigration facility in the city and that both were taken into custody. Questions and concerns coming from local officials and incoming Mayor Zoran Mamdani as President Donald Trump presses on with his crackdown on illegal immigration. Mitch McCann files this report for CNA from New York.
Here in New York in recent months, there has been growing concern among migrant communities and frustration from migrant advocates over arrests taking place inside the ICE, or Immigrations and Customs Enforcement facility in Lower Manhattan. The latest account of this happening has infuriated local officials. It's been reported that a 6-year-old Chinese boy was separated from his father by ICE agents inside this facility on November 26 during a routine immigration appointment. The boy's father was believed to have been transferred to an upstate correctional facility, but a community advocate who says she is close to the family claims that nobody knows where the young child is. New York's Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani wrote online that the 6-year-old boy had just enrolled in the first grade at an elementary school in Astoria. Now he's in custody alone. ICE won't say where. This cruelty serves no one. It must end, he wrote. New York Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez wrote online that between January and October, ICE arrested 151 children, citing data from the Deportation Data Project, and said they are tearing families apart and traumatizing kids, she wrote. Media reports indicate that the family attempted to seek asylum in the US after crossing the border earlier this year and were then held in detention for several weeks before being released. The same reports say that family members were arrested at an ICE facility during a check-in appointment in August, and that in a hearing a month later, an immigration court administratively closed their asylum case, which suggested that ICE was not imminently seeking their removal from the United States, and they were later released on parole. But despite that, they were again arrested when checking into their most recent appointment last week. In a statement reported by the City News website, a spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security said that ICE does not separate families. The spokesperson said the father refused to board a plane and was acting so disruptive and aggressive that he endangered the child's well-being. He even attempted to escape and abandon his son, the spokesperson said. There has been growing concern over the number of children being taken into ICE custody, as well as over ICE operations elsewhere. For CNA, I'm Mitch McCann in New York.
This July, Japan's far-right party, Sanseto, rode a Japanese first message to a shock over performance in the upper house election, leaping from 1 to 15 seats. Well, since then, there have been numerous signs of a rightward lean in Japan. Now, to head off the surging right, the ruling Liberal Democratic Party picked hardline conservative Sanae Takaichi as its leader and current prime minister. Why is right-wing ideology on the rise in Japan? Insight, CNA's weekly current affairs program, finds out.
Two days before US President Donald Trump met Japan's new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, anti-immigration rallies erupted nationwide, from downtown Tokyo to sleepy suburbs. Immigrants weren't the only target. Some protesters handed out anti-vaccine leaflets and waved anti-government placards, hallmarks of a right-wing populist party that has been making waves in Japan's political scene. Sanseto. Founded in 2020 by former LDP lawmaker Sohei Kamiya, Sanseto began on the political margins, floating ideas as radical as restoring some powers of the monarchy. But its hard line on immigration and the cost of living have gained traction. By 2025, Sanseto had captured 15 upper house seats. Their stellar showing shocked the political establishment and observers alike.
端的にすごく驚きました。とても参議院の選挙で比例代表で、野党で今その2番目にたくさん票を取るというようなところまで、議席が増えるっていうふうには思っていませんでした。
Why is Sanseto on the rise? Among its supporters, there are two key blocks. The first, those who have turned away from the ruling party. Tucked on a hillside opposite Shinagawa City Hall, Hirotaka Ueki and his staff are preparing for an upcoming street rally.
僕出身山口県ってとこなんですけど、山口県はもう自民党の岩盤支持層がいるようなところなので、安倍元総理も山口県の議員ですし、基本的には自民党に投票していましたし、僕自身自民党員だった時期もあるので。
But not anymore. The 43-year-old financial consultant is now firmly in the Sanseto camp.
実際この30年牛の間30年日本言われてますけれども、そういうところを見るとやっぱりその政治は方向性が良くなかったんじゃないかなとは思ってます。当時はまだ安倍元首相が存命だったので、安倍さんになってからだいぶ良くなってきたかなっていう思いはあったんですけど、2022年に残念ながらお亡くなりになってしまったので、ちょっとこれだと今その時の当時の首相やメンバーを考えてもあまりもしかしたらもう自民党には期待できないっていう思いが芽生えてきたっていうところがありますかね。僕はどちらかというと保守的な考え方が強いとは思うので、やっぱり日本の良さっていうのはしっかり生かしてほしいし、日本人のその地位っていうのをちゃんと守ってほしいな。
Right-wing populists are also breaking through with historically apathetic young voters. For example, in the 2024 lower house election, turnout among voters in their 20s was just 34.6%. Now that's compared to 68% for those in their 60s. But between last year's lower house election and this year's upper house race, turnout among voters in their 20s rose sharply to almost 50%. Many attracted by the right's message.
柳原正人って言います。で、今25歳ですね。前回の参議院選、参政党が飛躍した時が初めてだったんですよ。それまではもう投票権なんてって感じで、もう全く眼中になかったですね。はい。
For Yanagihara, one of his concerns is Japan's food security.
実家がそれこそ新潟で、米どころで農家に対してはすごい冷たいというか、保証が手薄い。もうまさに自分が思ってたようなこと、これやったらいいんじゃないかとか、こうあるべきなのにっていうのをもう代弁してくれた感じがして、すごい熱くなりましたね。
Right-wing parties' upstart image, challenging an ineffective status quo, drew grassroots support. A phenomenon captured in Sanseto's moniker.
Actually, Sanseto has an interesting name because Sansei in Japanese means political participation. And so a lot of people who are rather ignorant about politics feel that they are empowered, that their votes can make a difference, that joining the rally empower them.
So what will the right-wing surge mean for immigration, constitutional change, and how Japan remembers its past? You can catch the Insight episode, The Rise of Japan's Right Wing, tonight at 9 p.m. on CNA. And you can also catch up on CNA Video on Demand or CNA Insider's YouTube page. Right, time now for some headlines from media outlets in East Asia. On the Korea Times, Women's University Dongduk has announced plans to admit male students starting in 2029, saying the move to co-education is necessary for the institution's survival. Well, the decision has stoked debate on the future of women's universities in the country. A Kyoto report says that a 17-year-old has been arrested for allegedly using AI to carry out a cyber attack on a major internet cafe chain in Japan. The parent company of the chain says 7.3 million customers' personal information may have been leaked. Now, China's Jilin province is rolling out a 5-day snow break for primary and secondary school students this week, offering free experiences and discounts to ski resorts, ice rinks, and other attractions. Xinhua says the winter resort town is trying to boost tourism spending during the season peak, and many other Chinese regions are doing the exact same. Now, an award in Japan for the dish of the year has gone to rice-based foods. Well, it's an accolade given by restaurant search website operator Gurunavi to the dish that best represents food trends and cultural identity. Gurunavi's committee picked rice-based foods to reflect renewed public interest in the supply of the country's staple fare. A recent shortage saw the government releasing its rice reserves for the very first time to curb soaring prices due to poor harvests amid record-breaking heat. Gurunavi found that people became increasingly interested in finding innovative ways to make stockpiled rice taste even better. Well, the platform is hoping that the merit of rice will get a boost if new ways of eating it emerges, and even though people aren't consuming it as much as before. Now, matcha, the finely ground powder of processed green tea and cornerstone of Japanese culture, took second place. The trendy drink earned its position, all thanks to a spike in demand worldwide. While matcha, amid strong global enthusiasm, just like local Japanese rice, is also in short supply, with crop yields falling due to warmer temperatures. And that wraps up this Thursday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia and look us up on Facebook and YouTube. Have a good evening.